Hey guys, before we jump too far into the topic, I'd like to take a chance to remind you guys that if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notify button, that way you know when I post new content. That way you don't miss anything. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started into the main topic. So, one of the big things going on lately as far as topics go, that everybody seems to come back to again and again and again, is the increase in price of games. Some are kind of like, it's time, and others are just outright outraged and furious about the whole thing. That got me thinking, how much has the game price increased over the years? Is it really that big of a jump in price? And when was the last time we really had a big jump in price? Well, to go ahead and clear up my fuzzy memory and to put things in perspective, let's go way back to the Atari 2600. One of the most remembered and cherished consoles of older gamers is the Atari 2600, and it's easy to see why. It brought gaming into the home at a fairly reasonable price, or was it? This console debuted at $199 in 1977. You heard me, $200 in 1977. That's almost the cost of an Xbox Series S in 2020 in 1977. Adjusting that for inflation, that's roughly $853. Wow. And we were all worried that consoles in 2020 were going to cost over $500. Yeesh. The average game cost was somewhere around $40. Now keep in mind this is 1977, so if you adjust that price to how much it would cost in 2020, that's $171. Well, I'm feeling better already. How about you? Video's over. Have a good day. Fine. You're not convinced. Okay, so let's look at it this way. Let's look at the average price of gas. Hey. Don't run off. Stay with me. Stay with me here. Stick with me. Average price of gas in 1977, 62 cents. So you could fill up a gas tank for $10 or less on average. The average household income was only $14K a year. Now don't hold me to this. These aren't really hard numbers. This is what I got through a rough Google search. But moving on with this, if you could basically fill up your car once a week for about 3% of your weekly income. Average game was about 14% of your weekly income. A console would be 75% of your weekly income, or 7% of it over 10 weeks if you saved up with like a jar or layaway or whatever. Keep in mind, none of these numbers take into things like taxes, cost of rent, food, or any other expenses for the family. This was also a time where most households were single-income homes. Not that many women were in the workforce. The majority were still stay-at-home moms. This was not a cheap piece of tech at the time, to say the least. The next one we gotta look at is the Intellivision. This comes out 2 years after the Atari. It jumps the price up to $229. Adjust that for inflation, and it's $1,068 today. That's a 14% increase over the Atari at the time, where the average income only jumped from $14K to $16,500 a year. So the average increase of income for the household was 17%. Gas jumped way up to 86 cents a gallon, making that a 33% increase. Man, 1982 was rough. The average income barely goes up, gas goes up by almost a third or more. The price of the console goes up to 14%. The average game price stays the same at $40, thank goodness, but when you look at things, you had even less income on average than you did during the launch of the Atari. So you're able to collect even fewer games at the time. Finally, we start to get a bit of a break. The ColecoVision hits the scene. That comes out in 1982 and retails for $175. Adjusting for inflation, that's a $472 system. That is honestly not bad. Most of this comes into the fact that the average household income skyrockets. It's now $23,500, which explains why the inflation adjustment isn't so dramatic this time. Gas goes up, again, because, it's gas, up to $1.22 a gallon. That's a 41% increase. Ouch. Game prices stay the same again, which is great. That's $40. This is far more reasonable. 1982 kind of rocked, gotta admit. Income for people was up, so they have more money. It looks like consoles got more affordable. Unfortunately, this was right around the time that the game industry came to a huge crash due to the poor quality control and the pulling interest of public in gaming as a whole. due to that poor quality control in games when they were released. So it only took 2 years before this system was completely discontinued, just in time for, you guessed it, the NES to appear on the market. Coming out in 1985 and putting itself out there as a family entertainment system instead of a video game console, which at the time was a very, very important distinction, because video game consoles were considered bad, but an entertainment system, that's different. And some clever marketing with a new accessory, Rob the Robot, not a very good accessory, but made it seem more family friendly and more interesting than a regular video game console. Made the NES a very attractive entry, particularly since it came in around $180 or $433 with inflation. Keep in mind that's the normal system, not the really expensive one that came with Rob the Robot. It was a huge success. However, this was right about the time that the price of games went up for the very first time in industry history. They went up to $45. That translates into $109 if you adjust for today's market. The average household income, well, that stayed basically the same. That only went up to $23,620. Ooh, an extra $120 a year. Thank God gas prices went down a little bit. They went down to $1.12 a gallon. So people can buy as many games, but the quality of the games were far superior to what they had been getting, and the video game industry was back and thriving again. The next big price jump turned out to be the beginning of the 16-bit era. The Genesis and the TurboGrafx came out swinging in 1989 with a cost between $190 or $200 on console, depending on which one you got. That's either $397 adjusted for today's income or $418. Both systems sold games for a retail cost of $49.99, $50. That's roughly $104 per game by today's currency. Still far more expensive than our current price jump. Comically, this was right around the same amount that the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, Jaguar, GameCube, and Xbox would all sell their games for in the future, making those some of the cheapest games in the history of gaming, especially since the average household income would go from $30,000 in 1989 to $42,200 in 2001 when the Xbox launched. Not a single price increase in games, with only 2 exceptions. The Super Nintendo. These games averaged around $60. $19.90 and $60. Interesting. That's roughly $119 per game in today's market. With some of the games like Chrono Trigger, those sold for upwards of $80 for a retail copy. Most people were really happy to pay for the games because, like the NES before, the games you got were so much higher in quality than you had ever had before that was well worth the cost. Even though the household income right around this time crashed to $20,000 a year, arguably making the SNES one of the most expensive consoles to purchase games for since the Intellivision, with one notable exception, the Neo Geo. This was in many people's mind the console that proved to be the breaking point for many, with an entry point of $650 for the console itself in 1990 and $200 per cartridge. This system was a powerhouse, basically giving you arcade quality in the home, but with a hefty cost. Think of soaking a system costing $1,286 today and $396 per game. The system only sold like 1 million units, so most people never really knew anyone who had one when it was brand new. From this point on, we start to hit the standard that we've been stuck with since the Xbox 360 in 2005, all the way to today. Now, keep in mind, this includes a household income increase between $46,000 to $75,000 a year. That's a 61% increase in household income with 0 price increase in game cost. This is in part due to customer expectations keeping the game cost that low. The cost of development, along with the time it takes to develop a game, has only gotten longer. In 1977, you could develop a game in 3 to 6 months, upwards of a year if it was a really involved game. That's in the 70s. Today, you're looking at like 2, 3, 5 years to make a single game, with a much larger stake. There are also other factors that accumulate to things being cheaper today than they ever have been, and that's stores like GameStop and other secondhand markets allowing you to get games cheaper, and the amount of online sales allowing you to get games for half or less the retail cost, and the increase in indie game studios bringing us all these great titles at budget prices. That extra $10 a title is almost inconsequential in the scheme of things. Let's face it, Now is the absolute best time in video gaming. There has absolutely never been more variety of games and pricings in the market ever. Even with the rise of extra DLC and loot boxes, the cost of games is still on average cheaper than it ever has been before. Sure, you'll still have some games that cost you $120 or more with all the DLC included, and you can spend thousands on loot boxes you don't actually need to play a game at any given point in time. But for the savvy shopper who snaps up deals, they can find them super cheap, and you can get games at almost criminal prices in this day and age. Getting this worked about $10 more when we haven't even had a price increase in 15 years just doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when you take into account all the things mentioned above. Let's just enjoy the fact that we live in one of the cheapest times to be a gamer. Loot boxes and DLC aside, even taking into account DLC when you look at the average game length of 20 hours, and the DLC giving you anywhere between 4 to 10 hours of extra gameplay, that's actually a pretty good deal. You're getting a fourth of the length up to half of the length of the game of extra content for $20 to $30. Given you spent $60 for the first 20, that's not a bad deal. Now loot boxes, that stuff's just shady. Just avoid that as a rule. At any rate, I hope this put things into a new light for you and helped ease some of the sting for others. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, happy gaming.